Hello everyone, I hope you're all doing well, and today we're back with another sequel to one of my alternate scenarios. This time, it would be the sequel to my story about if Asterix and Obelix existed for real in Roman times. Surprisingly, although that video is far from being one of my most viewed videos on the channel, it still received immeasurable support, obtaining over 5,000 likes, which is absolutely insane proportionally to its number of views. Which is very much surprising. I definitely didn't expect it at all, since it was an alternate scenario based on a French comic book franchise. While my second part of Eastern Rome being immune to the Black Death, which managed to get twice as many views as the Asterix and Obelix video, barely managed to reach 1,700 likes. I wonder why. In any case, all of that is to say that, no, there won't be a third part of Eastern Rome being immune to the Black Death then, and that if you want to better understand this alternate story that we're going to continue today, I recommend watching the previous part for a better context and understanding of this crazy alternate timeline. Without anything else to say, let's begin with the continuation of this crazy story of the now Romans having access to the magic potion of Asterix and Obelix. So, in the last part, we split the conclusion of that video into two branches. The first branch was that Caesar could not force Panoramix to reveal the secret formula of the magic potion without the druid dying first from his terrible wounds caused by his countless tortures given by the Romans. In that first branch, Caesar doesn't discover the formula for the magic potion, and with no one else in the world having that knowledge, history would naturally resume a course very similar to our timeline, without any major changes other than that crazy historical anecdote we would inherit from the Romans about a mysterious Gallic village with a magic potion that gave extraordinary strength. A fact that many modern historians would interpret as exaggerations or even a mythological tale due to how surreal it seemed. But the second branch, which is the one we are going to explore today to create our sequel, would be one in which Caesar would manage to extract the formula from the druid's mouth, thus allowing him to obtain the secret of an incredible concoction of immeasurable potential, and then kill the druid and limit the knowledge of that magic potion to a very restricted number of trusted people. With that in mind, I'm going to give you a quick reminder of what that magic potion is capable of, but remember, for more details and context, watch the first part of this story. In a very simplified summary, whoever drinks this magic potion will gain physical abilities of strength and speed similar to Spider-Man's, of course except for the spider powers. But they will also have similar durability, meaning those who drink this potion could still be killed by lethal weapons like guns, which didn't exist in ancient Rome, but it's still important to mention, but also spears, swords, or arrows. The effects of the potion can generally last between 6 to 12 hours, with the duration of the effects varying depending on how recently the magical potion was made. Also, although the potion does not provide an apparent healing factor of any kind, it does cure you of most diseases, revitalizes you from any chronic damage you previously had, and furthermore, if abused with the correct dosage, it can even extend your lifespan by a lot. That would be one of the main reasons why Panoramix was so old in the comics, being approximately 80 years old when Asterix was born, and being around 115 years old by the time Caesar invaded Gaul. And here's a page of the comic showing what Panoramix would have looked like in the year 1 BCE, being over 160 years old. So as you can see, abused in the correct dosage, the magic potion practically doubles your lifespan, which is absolutely insane when you think about it, especially for important figures like Caesar or Augustus, and maybe more. But if I say abused with the correct dose, it is for a very good reason, because if you exceed the reasonable abuse of the magic potion, it could literally turn your body into stone, turning you into a dead statue. Also, it is possible to obtain permanent effects from the magic potion for life, but you need to do it under very specific conditions, such as being very young, preferably an infant, having optimal and perfect health, being of relatively strong build, even a little overweight, bathing in that magic potion, and then never drinking it again, otherwise you would turn into stone, as I said before. And even though you would emerge from that experience with permanent, lifelong effects from the magic potion, you would need a gigantic calorie intake to be functional in your day-to-day life. You would need to eat much more than the strongest strongmen of our time, and if you fail to meet your daily caloric needs, you would enter a state of hibernation that would render you completely useless. Now, as for the speed of producing the magic potion, it shouldn't be a big problem. Some ingredients would be difficult and expensive to obtain, but nothing that the gigantic fortune that Julius Caesar had amassed by then could not afford. Perhaps the only ingredient that would be extremely difficult to find and that would limit the production of the magic potion would be the five-leaf clover. But aside from those issues, could Julius Caesar guarantee the production of magic potion for his entire army? Or even for a single Roman legion? Well, at first, not really. If we go by the magic potion distribution we see in the Asterix and Obelix comics, a magic potion cauldron is capable of holding enough potion for 50 people. If we stick to that ratio, and we very generously assume that Caesar could produce in his army the equivalent of 10 cauldrons of magic potion a day, which would already be a lot, it would only be enough to provide the potion to 500 of his men. All of this for effects that would only last between 6 to 12 hours, which would not be profitable at all. I think that at first, Julius Caesar would have greatly regulated who would have access to the magic potion proportionally to the amount of potion that could be produced daily. The first person to always have a bottle of magic potion at his disposal as a priority would obviously be himself, but later on, it is possible that Caesar would create a new type of legion of magic potion warriors, a sort of elite warrior legion, that would not require as many men as a legion of thousands, with perhaps just a small group composed of 100 men being more than enough to make a huge difference in a battle. With that, Julius Caesar would ensure that the magic potion production would never be lacking for him or his new group of elite soldiers, always having reserves of that brew that could be preserved for months or even years without any problem. After all these preparations, we would find ourselves at the moment in which Caesar, in our original timeline, was about to cross the Rubicon, thus unleashing an open civil war between the supporters of Caesar and those of Pompey the Great. As we all know, following this challenge to the authority of the Roman Republic by Caesar, Pompey would abandon the city of Rome to escape to the Roman territories to the east and take advantage of his influence in those distant areas to prepare an army capable of challenging Caesar's experienced legions. But this time, Pompey and the majority of the senators on his side would not be able to escape from the Italian peninsula in time. Well, another aspect of the magic potion that I haven't mentioned yet is that it worked on all living creatures, not just humans. Thus, Caesar, along with a few of his men with personal supplies of magic potion, could give their horses the magic potion, giving them brutal effects of resistance and speed that could last for half a day. If humans with magic potion are already capable of moving at speeds comparable to the fastest animals in the animal kingdom, horses under the effects of the magic potion would be capable of traveling gigantic distances at subsonic speeds, which would be a brutal ride to experience, and in which any soldier mounted on one of those horses would also have to be under the effects of the magic potion in order to tame the animal with the effects of such a powerful potion. With that tremendous advantage, Caesar and a few of his men, probably his new group of elite soldiers with magic potion, would reach the south of Italy in a few hours without any problem, being able to reach Pompey and the senators who were going to escape in no time. Pompey, his group, and the few men who accompanied them would have been terrified and speechless by the brutal arrival of Caesar with his small group of elite soldiers moving at speeds worthy of Mercury himself, surrendering immediately without any way to defend themselves, and thus, with Caesar, winning the civil war before it had even really started. Now, it is true that Caesar was normally known for being very benevolent toward his enemies or rivals, too much so, in fact, as history would later show us. It's tempting to think that on this occasion, Caesar would pardon Pompey and the senators who sided with him, and of course that he would pardon some, but all of them, unlikely. Why unlikely? Simple, because of the enormous potential risk posed by people with the potential to betray his power and influence discovering the formula for the magic potion. Just imagining Pompey, a strong, charismatic man, and a military general of his stature, obtaining knowledge of that potion would be an idea that would send chills down Caesar's spine, potentially having the potential to create battles and wars worthy of the gods themselves in their mythologies. Therefore, as a preventive measure, and although he did not like the idea, Caesar would kill Pompey and many of the senators who accompanied him, sparing only a few, such as Brutus, for example. Normally, Caesar would be concerned about carrying out these actions publicly because of how much he cared about his public image and continuing to be seen as a benevolent, generous, and heroic being in the eyes of the Roman people, but with the magic potion in his hands, he no longer needed public approval for his purposes, at least not as much as before, and would be able to impose many more conditions on those who might fear or challenge him than in our timeline. And it is likely that, faced with the terrifying demonstration of supposed divine powers by Caesar and his men returned from Gaul, The senators and other people that Caesar would have forgiven, like Brutus, would not dare to rebel against him or betray him once again, due to the deep respect and terror they now had for a Caesar with a potion that gave him supposed divine powers, with the dictator taking advantage of people's ignorance and lack of knowledge of the true limits of that potion to impress and frighten even more, facilitating his access to power and total control of the Roman Republic. Following those events, Caesar, having prevented the escape of Pompey and his followers to the east to prepare an army, all the subsequent events that led to the civil war between him and Pompey would not occur, therefore, neither would the pursuit of Pompey to Egypt, and the eventual meeting between Julius Caesar and Cleopatra, and their future relationship that would lead to the birth of Caesarion, and many other extremely important events for the future of Rome. And in fact, in the meantime, Caesar would remain in Rome, focusing on fixing all the problems of the Republic in its territories in the West and taking care of minor problems, such as the possible opposition of some rebels like the sons of Pompey the Great. He would also be busy reforming the Republic from the ground up, securing his absolute power, and trying to instill the magic potion in Roman mythology, culture, and religion. While all this was happening, which could last for many years, the civil war in Egypt between Cleopatra and her brother would continue. In this timeline, it's possible that Cleopatra would end up losing that confrontation with her brother, since the support of Caesar and his men was one of the main reasons why she was able to regain power in Egypt under the tutelage of Rome, and Caesar more specifically. Cleopatra and her followers would likely end up executed by the cruel and impulsive Ptolemy XIII, but while Egypt maintained its previously established diplomatic relations with the Roman Republic, especially regarding its trade and grain exports, Caesar would not concern himself with Egypt's internal political affairs, at least for now. Returning to Rome, Caesar would begin to organize how to present the concept of the magic potion to the Romans, but also how to keep its manufacturing secret from the vast majority of people to limit future disasters of mythological proportions, in addition to reforming the Roman army from its core with this new weapon of mass destruction that this drink was. I think the most sensible thing would be to create an institution of mystical representatives, mixing Roman religion with Celtic ideas of Druidism, like creating priestesses in charge of concocting the magic potion, with each member having limited and specific knowledge of how to create it. What I'm trying to say is that the production and conception of the magic potion, in the long run, would be considered in the same way as Greek fire was in the Eastern Roman Empire later in our timeline. For those who didn't know, those who produced Greek fire for the Eastern Roman armies didn't have access to all the ingredients in the formula for that incredible fire. Each person in charge of producing it had limited access to the knowledge of that formula, only knowing the specific ingredients or elements they needed to have access to in order to contribute to that collective effort. Furthermore, there was an extremely strict and severe secrecy regarding who could access that extremely important position of producing Greek fire. They were so efficient at preserving the secret that no other empire or kingdom was able to use it, and later, the formula would be completely lost in the abysses of history, a formula that even today, we have not yet rediscovered. If the Eastern Romans were able to maintain such secrecy around the complete formula for Greek fire, I think Caesar could have instituted similar secrecy and organization toward the conception of the magic potion in this alternate timeline. Once all of this was organized and in place, steady and effective production of the magic potion could begin for Caesar, other key members of the Roman elite he relied on, and his newly established elite armies, providing magic potion to the equivalent of a classic Roman legion. Now, maybe 5,000 men with magic potion doesn't seem like much, but remember, we're talking about men who would have constant access to magic potion, with strength capable of lifting small buildings, and running at speeds that would make a cheetah look like it was moving at the speed of a snail. Knowing that the Roman soldiers were capable of crossing distances of about 30 kilometers, or 18.6 miles a day normally, just imagine the gigantic distances they could travel if they could run faster than a modern train without any difficulty. Literally, those elite soldiers with magic potion could head anywhere in Roman territories in less than a week at that point, very easily. And certainly people with magic potions could still be injured or killed with weapons like spears, swords, or arrows, but may I remind you that we are talking about Roman soldiers, the best protected and best equipped army against such weapons in ancient times, not simple warriors wearing trousers as protection, sometimes less than that. With Romans equipped with helmets, armor such as the loricas segmentatas or even just loricas hamatas, Practically all of the weaknesses of the magic potion, such as its lack of resistance to lethal weapons, would be considerably reduced to practically little more than a simple nuisance for those soldiers. And remember that a small village of just a few dozen Gallic warriors without any protection, armor, or military discipline could already defeat at least 1 or 2 Roman legions. Imagine what even 5,000 Roman men with magic potion could do with their extreme martial discipline, military experience, and equipment as protection. Simply put, they would be the most powerful small army in the history of humanity, and absolutely no other army in antiquity could stop them. Now, having clarified all of that, once Caesar had brought order to the Western territories, restructured the Republic from the ground up, established a magic potion-producing class, and restructured and reorganized his army in the wake of all that, he would finally be ready to return to his usual campaigns around the time of his actual death in our timeline. Now, keep in mind that by that point, Caesar would have been abusing the magic potion for years, drinking at least 1 dose every day so that its effects would be sustained throughout his daily life, and thus never cease to reflect a powerful, divine, and invincible image of himself. And as I explained previously, constant abuse of the magic potion within reason can extend your lifespan up to double that of the average human and can make you immune to most of the chronic illnesses and injuries you've had for a long time. Therefore, all the health problems Caesar would have suffered from, such as epileptic seizures or minor strokes, would have completely disappeared and been cured by the daily use of the magic potion, and perhaps even made him look a little bit younger. With all of this, Caesar would finally put into action his long-held plans, having much grander ambitions than in our timeline, thanks to having the magic potion in his possession, not needing as much political diplomacy as before to carry out the conquests he desired. Caesar would first deal with the Parthians, with his elite soldiers with access to magic potion and himself being able to travel from Rome to the far east of Anatolia in less than a week, and that's only assuming they would be walking and not riding, because then it would take them less time than that to get there. In an age where information took ages to reach leaders, the unexpected arrival at crazy speeds of the equivalent of a Roman legion with divine abilities alongside their leader would be totally unexpected and shocking to any enemy or rival of Rome, leaving any Parthian army that dared to challenge them petrified in terror. Armenia would be retaken under Roman control and annexed as a province rather than a client state. Having brought order to the region and having prepared the ground for the arrival of the regular Roman legions, which would arrive weeks or months after them, Caesar would continue his assault towards the Parthians. Caesar, in our timeline, planned to invade Parthia with 10 to 12 legions, but on this occasion he would organize his invasion and conquest plans differently. His plan would be simple. While he and his elite legion with magic potion advanced at incalculable speeds towards the objectives of conquest, the normal legions would follow at their pace, arriving weeks or months after Caesar and his group of supermen to organize the conquered regions and put order there, with the legitimacy of the divine power of the Romans and the dissuasion of any rebellion or attempt at independence from the Romans, as they had witnessed what they were capable of with that fearsome magic potion. The Parthian army at that time was highly decentralized, with the satraps providing the Parthian king with the men needed for battles. Realistically, Parthia could not muster more than 5,000 men around the Mesopotamian region initially, and at most, they would muster between 15,000 and 20,000 men after a month of preparation. But the Romans, with magic potion, could move at such speeds that any attempt to organize and mobilize Parthian soldiers would be useless, with Caesar and his legion of supermen advancing through Mesopotamia like an unstoppable hurricane, and in a few days, at most weeks, all of Mesopotamia would fall. Siege weapons would not be necessary. The power and strength of a Roman under the effects of the magic potion could raise entire neighborhoods in a few minutes. Now, hundreds or even thousands of men with magic potion would be more than enough to harass cities in a way that could not be done in our history until the invention of gunpowder, invading and completely destroying the city of Ctesiphon, and eliminating all Parthian presence or control in the region for good, with the inhabitants or local authorities being unable to do anything but surrender to Roman control, and thus, with Caesar achieving what Trajan could not in our timeline, completely annexing Mesopotamia as another Roman province. After that, instead of continuing further and conquering the entire Parthian Empire and its remnants, Caesar would see the usefulness of first focusing on the eastern part of the world most well known by the Romans, especially while the production of magic potion could not be higher than what he could obtain at the moment. After all, although he and his most loyal men pretended to be otherwise, they knew very well that drinking the magic potion did not make you as invincible as it made you seem. So, after having fully established his legitimacy in Mesopotamia, which was already a great achievement given that he now had direct access to the Persian Gulf, Caesar would pay a visit to Egypt to put things in order there as well. A humble possibility would be that Caesar would remove Ptolemy XIII from power and put in his place a new king who would be completely loyal to Rome, making Egypt a fully Romanized client state. But in the context of having the magic potion and taking advantage of every situation to legitimize his divinity thanks to the psychological impact that the magic potion would have on his enemies and rivals, it is more likely that Caesar would conquer and completely annex Egypt into a Roman province, perhaps creating religious connections with the local authorities with Alexander the Great, considering himself his legitimate successor and new pharaoh of Egypt, again taking advantage of the psychological impact of the locals seeing Caesar and his men with superhuman abilities worthy of the gods themselves. After that, under the context of having the magic potion, and that Caesar would be completely cured of his illnesses and chronic health problems, plus having been revitalized, slightly rejuvenated, and with a life expectancy practically doubled, the crazy expectations that Plutarch had about Caesar's future conquests had he not been assassinated could here be plausible. That is, to conquer most of the territories around the Black Sea, annex the Scythians, conquer Dacia, extend Roman control and influence into Illyria and further north in the Balkans, and even conquer Germania, or at least part of it. That may sound totally crazy at first glance without any context, but remember that the magic potion would be in the equation in this story, with hundreds or even thousands of men being able to travel around the entire classical world in just a few days, and being able to legitimize their control over conquered peoples merely with the psychological impact of seeing those demigods arriving in such a brutal manner, thus reducing the need for constant forces to be maintained in certain areas due to the lower risk of rebellions. In Rome itself, Caesar would be acclaimed, loved, and received as a hero, but more importantly, as a god. And in the context of the enormous psychological effect that the appearance of the magic potion would have had on the Roman world, Caesar could gradually remove the taboo Romans had against deifying their leaders, and even more so, against the idea of an absolute ruler. Caesar would spend the following years and even decades stabilizing and properly managing all the new conquests he had achieved, a daunting task, but far from impossible in this timeline, even with such a small population. Because, remember, Roman soldiers were not just soldiers, they were builders, architects, and raisers of fortresses and cities. With the magic potion at their disposal, and with its production eventually becoming more normal on a larger scale, the Romans could build roads, aqueducts, other infrastructure, and entire cities at literally industrial speeds, even having a construction capacity greater than what we have today with all our technologies, with literally just a few dozen men being more than enough to urbanize entire areas of the probably by now Roman Empire. While in our timeline, places like Gaul took practically a century to be fully urbanized in the Roman way, here, all the new territories added to the empire would have been urbanized and Romanized in just a few months, maybe years at most. These new lands could contain many resources and agricultural potential for the cultivation of the ingredients necessary for the magic potion, massively increasing its production, and as the decades pass, it is possible that eventually all Roman legions, or at least the majority, will have full or partial access to the magic potion, making the Roman army, literally, an army invincible to any other army on the planet at that time. But as I said before, the magic potion would be very useful in more ways than just the military, like building roads, infrastructure, cities, or simply giving Roman ships a magic potion to row at breakneck speeds, allowing Roman fleets to travel at unprecedented speeds throughout the Mediterranean and even beyond. Communication would also be greatly streamlined, with postmen and mail carriers able to travel across the entire empire in just a few days at most. Ironically, this revolution in the Roman way of life thanks to the magic potion would mimic the effects of a large-scale industrial revolution, but without any literal industrial revolution being possible, since the existence of the magic potion would obviously create a feeling of general stagnation, as it would not require any mechanization or automation to perform superhuman tasks, which could be very dangerous in the distant future. But for now, with Julius Caesar in charge, and for a long time to come, things could normalize in that new status quo of the Romans, with the new generations having only known the absolutist and deified dictatorial system of Julius Caesar. But eventually, Caesar would also die, even with the effects of the magic potion prolonging his life greatly, perhaps living into the middle of the 1st century CE. But here, just like in our timeline, Caesar, long before all the brutal changes we would have created in this new version of history, would have also recognized Octavian's great political skill, adopting him as his successor, a successor who would have had decades to prepare and learn everything he could from his adoptive father to be the next ideal leader, with him also having received the grand honor of being able to abuse the magic potion to massively extend his lifespan, the effect being only more effective on him than on Caesar himself, as Octavian started abusing the magic potion being much younger. And unlike our story, there would be no Caesarion nor Mark Antony to challenge Octavian's legitimacy as Caesar's rightful heir, ensuring his passage of power without the slightest obstacle, and ensuring another century or so of reign under the dynasty that Caesar would have initiated. But not even the death of an extremely old Octavian would interrupt that dynasty and its influence in the Roman world, because, thanks to all the knowledge that panoramics had left before being killed by Caesar, they would know perfectly well that, although dangerous, the effects of the magic potion could be permanently transferred to people if the youngest children, but also those in the best possible physical condition, were bathed in that magic brew as soon as possible in their early life. With that, and the long lifespans they would have, I doubt that Caesar, or at least Octavian, would die without having had offspring who could have experienced the permanent effects of the magic potion, or at least having adopted children with the potential to receive that procedure, thus ensuring the legacy of Caesar's dynasty for a very long time. And over time, with hundreds of thousands of soldiers having access to the magic potion, I have no doubt that places like what remained of the Parthian Empire, the various Indian kingdoms, and perhaps even China, could be completely subjugated to the mighty, unstoppable, and deified Roman Empire. But with that, I think this is a good moment to end this video. I hope you enjoyed this crazy sequel to the story in which Asterix and Obelix's village and their magic potion would have existed. Anyway, don't forget to subscribe, like the video, become a member of the channel in order to have early access to new videos, and comment on what you thought of it. Thank you to the first members of my channel, shout out to you guys, and I deeply appreciate your support of my work and projects to come, and without anything else to say, see you next time.